Well, g'day everyone, and thanks very much for joining. I'm joined today by Craig Hayes, and Craig is currently driving a 50,000 seat Microsoft 365 uplift across multiple countries. An experienced global executive with a heavy operational background spanning MasterCard, G4S, and others, his core expertise lies at the intersection of large-scale structural change, complex risk management, and building resilient operating models for the AI era. Craig, thanks very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'm going to start with a question, and as you guys know, there's very little pre-preparation for these questions. I always spring them on our guests. But the first question is that you have argued recently that nice leadership is actually a disservice to IT and security teams during large transformations, which, is potentially a controversial thing to think. Can you share a specific operational win where choosing transparency over comfort has kind of saved a major development that you've been working on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the context of that statement of nice, it was actually versus right. So doing the nice thing is often detrimental. It sort of leads you down the path of potentially prejudicing people or favoring people, or doing something that looks, like the right thing in the moment, but it's not the right thing long term. I think with most transformations, you end up with that opportunity of how you deal with technology and people. I think particularly for me, I was involved in a very large transformation program a few years ago, running payment platforms globally, and we were bringing a whole bunch of them together. We had done sort of 3 acquisitions, and through that process, there was, as there always is, there's technology, there's people, there's things that you're going to keep, there's things that you sort of going to deprecate and move away from. And we knew which platforms we were going to keep and which ones we were going to probably not persist with. And I think the terminology, people don't like going, this is something we're not going to do anymore. It gets people worried, and particularly if you've got a long change program, it means that there's a period of time where you are calling something end of life, but it's not quite end of life yet. So we had a platform. We knew it was going to be end of life. We came up with this great fancy name called, it's a legacy platform. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that can I guess identify with that. We don't quite call it the end of life platform. We just say, hey, that's the older one, and we've got the new shiny one being built. And we got to the point where we knew we weren't going to get significant investment in it, and we had to carry on running it for a period of time. And so we did a bit of a risk assessment on the platform, and I think probably the big learning for me in all of this, and the big win was, we really took the time to understand what it meant to try and keep this platform running from a customer point of view, from a technology point of view, knowing that we would most likely not get investment at all. And so we documented out probably some of the worst failure scenarios that we could come up with. And 6 months later, had it happen, pretty much almost word for word what we said, this is worst case scenario, it ended up happening. We had a multiple database failure, we had multi-site failure, we had days and days of the incident running, we had weeks of cleanup and sort of months of rebuilding financial transactions and reconciliations, and it was an absolute disaster. And I think, you're sort of thinking, well, where's the win in all of this? We're talking about wins here. Well, the win was actually that we'd done that risk assessment, and we'd communicated it clearly and objectively, and we'd explained to business, if you persist in this, this is what you're carrying, and you actually need to accept that. And we need to be careful about how we talk about things, because words matter. And when you go, this is a legacy platform, not an end-of-life platform, people still think that you're going to persist with it and invest in it accordingly. Look, I'd love to say that it's the fairy tale ending and, never waste a good crisis and all of that. And we ended up with millions and millions of dollars being poured in. And we rebuilt the platform. That's just simply not the case. And most large-scale organizations are not going to do that for you. If they've made a budget decision and an investment decision, they're not just going to reverse that. But I think what it did do for us is it gave us, maybe sort of 2 or 3 wins from that. The first was um, it built credibility for us. So having the conversation, using the right terminology, talking about the risk that the change program was going to bring in, making business aware of what they were going to be wearing if things went wrong, and really spelling it out for them and saying, hey guys, if you're going to call this a legacy platform and you're not going to invest, that's great, that's your choice, but here's all the risk that comes with that. And then when it was realized, it wasn't a case of how did we get here. Nobody went around going, how did we get here? Everybody went around going, how did we not make sure that we moved through this quicker? Or how did we, but nobody was in the dark around how did we end up in that particular situation. So I think that was a big one for us because it changed the whole way that we used language. And I think, if there's something that I could say to particularly the cyber community, when you're dealing with these kind of issues, risk is always the right language to be using. It's the right way to position things, and it's never about trying to force somebody to invest in something that they don't want to, but it is about being clear around the consequences of what would happen if you don't. So that was, I think that was probably one of the bigger wins that we had with that one. I think the other one was just it forced us to relook at the whole change program. Again, I'm 100% sure I'm not unique in this situation, that when you have large scale, long running change programs, people seem to very often underestimate how long it will take to get off a particular technology or deprecate an application or downsize or downscale a particular team. They're always very optimistic that they'll get through the painful parts quite quickly. And so it actually allowed us to go back to the change program and say, hey guys, we need to rethink this, because you thought that we would get off the platform in 6 months and that was a tolerable risk to take. But if we're saying from a business point of view, we can't get off for 18 months, then your risk profile has changed substantially. And so again, it's that ability to have the conversations. It's the ability to be the trusted partner around the table. And so, for us, the win was, hey, you guys actually do know what you're talking about. You did see it coming. You did understand the risk, and you've had the conversation with us. And so now we want to make sure that anything else you're seeing in that space, that we actually take it quite seriously. Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the bigger wins. It's kind of really stuck with me, that objective conversation to have around the risk, rather than talking about investment, or rather than talking about perhaps other angles, or you're going to lose this revenue, or you're going to have this conversation with customers. It comes down to what is the risk that you as a business are prepared to take. And I think cyberspace, that's almost the entire conversation that you're going to be having.
Well, it's interesting, the shift in psychology of people.
Yeah.
For a long time, cyber has been an afterthought. To varying degrees of truthfulness, over the course of history, cyber has often been an afterthought, something you need to tack on at the end after a project's done, or something you
Yep.
turn on after an attack happens, or something like that. I think part of it is about not wanting to breathe life into the possibility that something could go wrong. And it sounds like that's something that you've done at an early stage as well, is not
Yep.
breathe life into risk or what could happen, but kind of build that in as part of the scenario. This could be the worst part of what happens. And at least once you've done that, you're kind of, it's like jumping into the ocean on a cold day. The shock, you've kind of prepared yourself for the shock, so once something actually happens, you go, okay, well, I understand this is what we need to do now. This is the impact of it, rather than trying to pick that all up after the fact. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Now, another interesting thing, and I can't speak Latin. Another interesting thing that I've found out about you is a personal mantra that you live by. I'm not going to say the Latin, but I'll ask you to if you can. But basically, the mantra, as I understand it, is I shall either find a way or make one. Now, I've been in trouble before for living by the mantra that says, ask for forgiveness, not permission. I'm trying to do that a little bit less as I get older. But that's an interesting thing to live by. But looking back at the kind of really big, high stakes technical integrations that you've led at places like MasterCard, What was the one specific moment that that philosophy that you've had was tested? When did you have to put that into practice?
Oh wow. Yeah, pretty much every program I've worked at, there come times where you go, this was the expected path forward, and it's just no longer going to be viable.
Well, the best laid plans,
Yeah,
never survive contact with the enemy.
yeah,
I think I said that on my last podcast as well. So you're not alone in kind of that being a mantra that you have to live by when you're making the decisions here, right?
yeah. It's an interesting one. It's a quote from the general Hannibal when he was going to go and sack Rome, and he got told no one's kind of gone over the mountains with an army before. And his sort of response to that was, well, I'll find a way to do it, or I'll make a way to do it. And I think for me, that's just been one of those things where if you've got drive and passion to get stuff done, then just because the way that you thought it should happen or could happen doesn't materialize, doesn't mean that you stop there. I think probably the first moment that phrase became real for me, many years ago, and I'm not going to say a company or person's name because it wouldn't be fair to them, but I ended up with a particularly difficult upward management relationship. And it wasn't that the person was a terrible person at all, or even a bad leader. It was just, we were time zones away, we were countries away. We had different views on things, and it wasn't easy to just get in a room and have a conversation and really work things out. And the person was a little bit old school and really was around sort of my way is the only way. And I remember at the time the company had invested in a business coach for the management team, and I sort of was chatting to her, going, I'm really struggling to find the common ground here, because it seems the only common ground is the ground right in front of his opinion on things. And that was when she said to me, when you think about a river coming down a mountain and hitting a big boulder, there's a number of ways that river can go. It can go over the rock, it can go around the rock, it can go through the rock. So that the one that will take the most time, the most effort, and will be the least successful will be trying to go through the rock. It's very seldom that you will see, a rock with a big hole in it, unless there was no other way that the water could flow. And so she said to me at that time, if there's no way through, then it's your responsibility as a good leader and a good manager for your team and your deliverables to find the way around. And it was that phrase, find the way around, that really stuck with me. And so when I saw that quote from Hannibal, I was like, well, I think that kind of really summarizes what my ideal is. Now, it's not, trust me, it's not that I get that right on a even semi-regular basis. That's the ideal, that's the North Star for me, and that's what I try and do. Try and find the ways that we can get stuff done, even when there's a blocker, even when there's things that are difficult to get through. There's always a way that you can get around. And I think my approach to dealing with people and teams, and the transparency and integrity that I try and apply to those, comes directly from try and find that way. And very seldom is it running up to somebody and then running right through them just because they don't agree with you.
Yeah, nice. I like it. I'm practicing my Latin after this call, by the way.
Yeah, Don't ask me to say it. I don't think I can even say the Latin well. I'd be terrible at it.
I saw it in the show notes about what I want to talk to you about today, and I just thought, yeah,
just move on. Version. Yeah, that Latin phrase.
Yeah, that's it. Now, look, you're in a pretty good spot, a pretty good vantage point with your experience around the different parts of the world that you've worked in. So, drawing on your background securing global payment gateways at MasterCard, your current focus on the environmental costs of AI, and your general experience around the world, what is one thing happening in ANZ cyber or IT right now that the rest of the world should be paying attention to?
Oh, the rest of the world should be paying attention to. That's a good one. So broad brushstroke, I went to the Microsoft AI Roadshow a couple of weeks ago in Sydney, and Yeah, it's an amazing experience. You see kind of what's on the horizon, and particularly around the agentic AI piece. Um, and I think a couple of things came out. One of a mate of mine from another company, he actually did a post on this, and he said it's really interesting what's not been spoken about in these events. You know, sort of 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of it was around give us your storage. You know, we've got Azure, we've got Google Cloud, we've got AWS. You know, let us take on the responsibility of holding your data, securing your data. You know, you come to us. It's, you know, it's storage as a service. And Microsoft really doubled down on a lot of their functionality being contingent on you having your data sitting in the cloud for them to be able to process. Well, that that kind of seems to be just a given now, and nobody really seems to be fussed about where your data is sitting as long as it's cloud. You know, Microsoft was talking around the 365 suite, Copilot Plus, Foundry, Agent 365. Their focus, from everything that you can see from the keynote that Satya Nadella gave, they're interested in your compute,
Right.
and not just arbitrary compute. They're interested in the compute that drives your core business processes. So that was an interesting thing for me, particularly with the risk mindset, particularly with the transformation mindset. Going, if I take a full step back and just go a complete objective view of this, we have a couple of large players in the world that are saying invest in automation, efficiency, capability at the agentic level to make your business run smoothly, to make it more capable, to build skills within your team around that, to uplift everything so that it's a much more efficient and kind of whatever you can envisage, we can do through the agents that you can build, you can manage. And so everything's this big push around build your business in the most efficient way on the back of an agent platform, which, by the way, will provide for you. We'll do the
Indeed.
compute. We'll do all of these wonderful things. We'll create an agent market for first and third party agents, and we'll allow you to take the best of the best. And that was awesome. And then a few days later, I read an article around a small business that had built, core processes around Claude 5.7, I think it was, and Anthropic had just cut their capability. So they'd received a letter saying, hey, we're not going to provide you these services anymore. And so suddenly you've got this very real, imagine the future, we can deliver all of this to you, but now you've got an incredibly high contingency around the risk that you are placing on that third-party vendor to be so embedded in your business that if they suddenly stop providing you services, it's not just that you don't have email for a day. It's they've encouraged you to build your entire business flow on the back of these agents, and when that doesn't materialize, I think there's going to be some real issues. So bringing that back, what should we be thinking about in Australia? I think it's, at a high level, I think there's a few things there. I think one is just that continued old perla around data sovereignty. More and more we're going to be pushed to put our data in other people's locations, have other people process it for us and leverage that data for us. And I think we're going to be really, really I guess just the level of risk around what happens with that data, who ends up owning it, who ends up owning the variations of that, how do we secure that? That's going to be a really big issue. And I think we're going to keep talking around data security, data privacy, data sovereignty for a long time, just purely because it's no longer the where is it stored. It's actually around who's processing it and where is it being processed, and what is actually happening to that data through that processing feed. And I think the other big one is the obvious. It's the compute. We have an opportunity potentially to be a country that brings compute onto the world stage, not necessarily to the scale of the Americans or the Chinese in terms of their ability, but in terms of, again, keeping stuff on shore and creating the capability of having processing compute available here to the scale that corporations and large organizations, particularly Australia-based ones, are going to want it. I think there's an opportunity there as well. And I think just skills is going to be the other big one. I think on the other chat that I had that you've probably got some of the notes from, I think one of the things that I said in terms of IT professionals moving forward, I think probably the two things that we're going to need to be are agile and resilient. The ability to continually reinvent ourselves, but also to not fall apart while we do that, and to be able to persist in doing that over a long period of time. And I think you've probably got maybe a 2 to 3 year window now where a lot of people are going to have to reinvent the skills, the capabilities, the way that they think around IT work, IT processes, the technology, and ownership and risk of that technology. I think that's going to be a big deal. And so I think, again, Australia, we're pretty good in that environment in terms of lifting up and upskilling people and making that available. We've got a great tertiary education network. We've got a great skills network. I think there's a huge market there for us to be getting on the front foot and creating IT professionals that are trained in the things that are going to matter in the next 2-3 years. Yeah,
it's an interesting kind of connection. What did you say? Resilience and agility.
Yeah,
It's almost in certain circumstances you think of resilience like a rock, and something being agile. It doesn't, it's an interesting kind of balance that people will have to have.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Now, a question, totally, well, not totally, but mostly off the topic of what you just answered. And I feel like, AI is mentioned like 30 times in every one of the shows that I do.
Yeah.
But I've been seeing over the past couple of years, since tools like ChatGPT and Claude and whatnot have become really commonplace, a lot of different responses from businesses trying to make sure that their users are using it securely. From the beginning where people did nothing, to the beginning where people were, or IT and security people were kind of freaking out and blocking things, which some people are still doing, saying, no, you can't use it at all, to trying to get corporate accounts, to building their own versions of these chatbots, to spinning up tools that look at every prompt on every provider and saying, yes, you can use all of them, but we're going to look at what all the prompts are, so make sure you're being safe. How do you think that the industry is kind of responding to this? Are they doing it well? Are we, getting towards the stages where we're starting to figure out how this should work and enabling people, or where are we kind of sitting in there?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think if you'd asked me that maybe 3 weeks ago, I probably would have had a slightly different answer. But really spending time at that Microsoft event and seeing the approach that they're taking, and I guess there's a few things here. There's the big risk of BYO AI. Companies don't lock down the ability for people to use AI. There's the subscription-based services for personal use, and there's no information control over that. And I think that was one of the big issues, particularly in the early versions of AI being available, Copilot, those kind of in-house platforms being available, that securing the data rings and all of that. That's largely, I think, been sort of taken care of. Not to say every company does it well, but if it's on your radar and you want to do it well, there are great tools, there's great processes, there's good use cases, there's great white papers in terms of how to do it. So I think we're making good progress in the how do I do this data responsibly within an organization. I think the other two things that really, maybe a little while ago would have been a problem for me. One would have been inherent bias. And I think that's something that we just see right the way through, a lot of the models. There's been a lot of concern raised around that. And the problem with bias and consistency is what you're looking for in an organization, and particularly if you're starting to think through agentic AI, is if 5 different people in the company in 5 different locations all ask the same prompt off the same set of data, do they get the same set of results back? And is it something that we trust? And is it going to be something that we can build a business process against? I think there's no quick answer for the biases. But for example, I can speak to what I saw what Microsoft are doing, and they're going, well, let's build an inbuilt agent saying, you're the skeptic, or you're the analyst, or the researcher, and you've got all these different agent personalities. And what they're doing now is bringing multi-mode or multi-model validation in. So, for example, you can go into skeptic mode and you can say, hey, ChatGPT 5, I want you to go and do this task and pull this information. Claude 5.7, I want you to be the one that goes and validates that they've done it the right way, and would you have come to the same set of results? And so that sort of validation and cross-model validation is starting to really pick up. I don't think it kills the bias conversation. I think those early conversations, and I believe a lot of it came back to some of the primary concerns that Elon Musk had with AI in the beginning, was somebody controls how the AI is going to interpret. But I think that's been diffused substantially. I think it will get better. I think people are aware of it, and it's certainly a long way from I think the ChatGPT 3, where you go, whatever it was, how many O's in tomato, or the favorite one that came out of me. Oh yes, no, it actually does have that number of letters, and so self-correcting, but over a period of time after you've pointed it out. I think probably
it's
the
such a
bigger
yes man
one
as well, right? Often they're just like, you say, I've got this really good idea, and you explain your terrible idea, and you say, that's a good idea, right? And it says, yeah,
it's
awesome.
it's a great idea.
Like,
And so I think people are getting smarter with prompting.
Yeah.
People are understanding that there's those kind of things that you can actually switch off in prompts. You can say, don't remove any inherent bias, or remove any inherent assumptions, or remove positive validation, from the process. And so you can guide it. And I think that's the whole path of the agentic piece, is getting to the point where you understand the kind of prompt and the kind of environment you want to create, and then making sure that it's replicable, over and over and over again. I guess the one that I still think is going to be an interesting one over time, I think, is the ethics piece. There's a lot of conversation around what's the ethical use of AI, and I find it interesting, having worked in companies with in different countries, but then also working in teams across multiple nationalities. I think one of the last leadership teams I was in, in my previous job, I think there were 13 of us on the senior leadership team, and there were 11 nationalities in that group. And so now you start thinking through, well, what are the implications around trying to find a global ethics framework, when ethics and morality from country to country, from culture to culture, are going to be so variable, and what somebody might feel is an appropriate use of AI in one country might be completely inappropriate in another. And I think, I guess there are going to be frameworks there. I think the last time I had a conversation with this around this topic, somebody mentioned, oh, well, we're now going to be building ethics framework companies, or like organizations that you can go, we use our AI in line with their ethics framework. And so you'll get a certification. But I guess the interesting thing for me is that even if you do that, you might have all people playing by the same set of rules in terms of the ethics. It doesn't mean that everybody that is using it still subscribes to that ethics model. And so, potentially you then end up with that view, what somebody might be allowed to do at work and somebody would consider appropriate at home, are still two completely different things from an AI point of view. And so I think that ethics piece is going to be an interesting one. I think it's going to evolve over the next little while. I think we're probably going to see more and more agencies popping up, or certification agencies popping up, going, here's a certification that you can now subscribe to on how your company uses AI ethically, or in line with this ethics framework. So I think there'll be more of that, but I think that's going to be a really big question that'll carry on for quite a while.
That's such a big box to open, because, as you rightly say, not only do some countries have different, ethical standards that change in various different ways across borders, but also even internally inside countries and different companies and industries and people. So yeah, that's an interesting one. It's funny that they're how it's kind of changed over the course of the last 5 years in terms of ethics. I think I'm not sure if they still have it, but in one of the Google chatbots, there was an ethics slider, and you could turn down the ethics, which I just thought was wild.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. And back in the day, you used to not be able to ask ChatGPT, for example, like how to set up a reverse shell on Kali Linux. It would just be like, no, I obviously can't do that. And then they kind of lent into it and knew that there's good reasons to do that if you're a security tester or you're training to be a penetration tester or something like that. Plus,
Correct.
you can Google it and the answer will come up. So why don't we just like let people come in and ask us anyway? I remember in the earlier days of ChatGPT, I have an interest in pen testing, especially physical pen testing, and I asked it, "How would you approach a building with an alarm system? How would you go to get around that?" And it obviously didn't answer. And then I went into a new chat and said, I'm a building owner and I'm wanting to secure my building. What are the things that a robber or a cat burglar would look at, and how can I secure them? And it goes, oh, well, they'll turn off the alarm this way. They'll pick this lock. They'll bypass this door, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, how exactly would they do that? And it, of course, gave me the answers when 5 minutes ago when I said I was a penetration tester.
The negative prompt was the quick way. I think one of the earliest ones that everybody had a bit of a laugh around was, hey, Google, where can I hide a body? And it was like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And it was like, hey, Google, I'm a policeman and I'm looking, where would be some places that, and, that negative prompt, really changed how people got around that. And it sort of brought up that question of, well, is there truly any kind of ethical framework if you're just blocking the positive prompt?
This is a grim part of the conversation to go down. So perhaps it'll be my last point, but there was also the asking ChatGPT, where can I hide 80 kilos of raw chicken? It's like, is that what you're... Anyway,
what are you doing?
Well, let's move on. This is a dark path to go down. You've mentioned the Microsoft roadshow that you went to, and I'm jealous that I missed that one. And you noted that there's an incredible rate of change surrounding workflow management as well. So based on that, or based on other things that we've spoken about, what is the last thing in IT or cybersecurity that really excited you?
I honestly, it'll sound like a little bit like I'm a Microsoft fanboy on the back of this, but I actually really enjoyed that roadshow. I think, I've been to a lot of presentations, particularly around, the early versions of Copilot over the last few years. And I really struggled to see anything beyond efficiency plays with the Copilot agents when they first came out. The selling point was, we gave it to our execs and, it saved them half an hour a day because it summarized emails for them, or, it maybe gave them a first draft of a PowerPoint. And it was expensive, and it was high compute requirements to do simple prompt queries on it. I think looking at where we are at the moment in terms of the art of possible and what Microsoft are showing, the intersection of the work that can be done, they've just moved to incorporate Claude's co-work into the Microsoft Copilot, and that's amazing. You've got complex multi-prompt task sequencing that you can drop a scenario in as the prompt with a bunch of outputs, and it literally shows you the progress, it shows you the output files, shows you everything that it's doing, what it's referencing, and so the level of control around what data is being used, the level of managed output is obviously really helpful now in terms of this is specifically what I want to get. But I think what really excited me was, in the past, you had to be so specific about the prompt that you put in to get exactly what you want out of it. Otherwise, you sit there and you're 10 prompts in, trying to just tweak the one thing that you're trying to get, and then you go, it would have just been quicker for me to do this, without that. Whereas now you're putting in, and I don't want to say vague prompts, but now you're putting in scenario-based prompts into co-work, for example, and you're getting this incredible set of outputs that you can actually tweak on the fly. And I think for me that was probably one of the most exciting things I've seen for a while in IT. It's the ability for end user compute combined with substantial server side compute as a service, offering you the ability to take, any regular tasks that you have, or any regular sequence of tasks that you have, even if the data is changing or the audience is changing, and just being able to make a few minor tweaks to your prompt, point it at a chunk of data and go, give me what I need. And getting out something that's credible, it's reasonably accurate. The first pass quality is great. Gives you a summary of what it's done. So it's not even, here's a black box, throw something in, get something out. It's now, it's a black box with a very transparent top window that you can look in, and it's going, hey, I'm busy doing this for you now, and I'm busy doing that for you now. And so I think the fear mongering and sort of the real concerns that came out of AI, people have listened to. People like Microsoft have actually listened to that and gone, how do I get large scale adoption? And these are the concerns I need to address, and they've done that well. And I think that's exciting. I think looking at the enterprise-wide impact of these kinds of developments, the potential there's massive. I went to a CIO conference probably 2 years ago now, and I think Forbes was quoted as saying that their belief was that AI would not have a significant measurable business impact within the next 10 years. And just seeing that evolution of product, evolution of use case, evolution of usability, and transparency and ethical frameworking, and everything else that they've really sort of listened to the top concerns, and they've addressed that. And looking at that now, going, I think Forbes didn't see that one coming. Yeah.
That and the rest of the supportive infrastructure, the security tools catching up, the business
Correct.
processes catching up, and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of rounding it out nicely as well. I'm seeing, at least from my vantage point. Well, Craig, I often say I wish I booked these meetings in for 2 hours, because it's been wonderful talking to you. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to come and talk to us. I'm really hoping that maybe in 6 months or a year's time as well, we can have you back, hear about the rest of the interesting stuff that's happening with you and your work. But very much looking forward to speaking to you again. And thanks very much for your time. And thanks to you guys for joining.
No worries. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.